Welcome to another chilling episode of horror stories that will keep you awake at night. Today, we're delving into the terrifying world of skinwalkers, one of the most feared creatures in Native American folklore. This particular story has been making rounds on Reddit's No Sleep community, where users share their most terrifying experiences. The tale I'm about to tell you comes from a user who claims to have encountered something inexplicable while camping in the forests of northern Arizona near Navajo Nation territory. As with all stories from this community, I'll leave it to you to decide what to believe. But I must warn you, this account may change the way you view those quiet, isolated woods forever. Our story begins with Michael, a 28-year-old wildlife photographer who had been planning a solo camping trip to capture images of the desert landscape at dusk. Having grown up in Arizona, Michael was no stranger to the outdoors and had ventured into remote areas countless times before. He packed his photography equipment, enough supplies for 3 days, and headed out to a secluded spot he had researched thoroughly. The location was perfect, situated on public land, but bordering Navajo territory, offering spectacular views of the canyon and forest that would make for stunning photographs. As Michael set up his camp that afternoon, he couldn't shake the feeling that something felt different about this trip, despite having visited similar areas many times before. The first evening passed uneventfully as Michael captured the sunset over the canyon, the vibrant oranges and purples painting the sky in a breathtaking display. After reviewing his photos and enjoying a simple dinner by the campfire, he settled into his tent around 11 p.m. The wilderness around him was alive with familiar nocturnal sounds, crickets chirping rhythmically, and the occasional hoot of an owl in the distance. Michael drifted to sleep easily, exhausted from the day's hike and photography session, completely unaware that his peaceful camping trip was about to take a disturbing turn that would challenge everything he believed about the natural world and the creatures that inhabit its darkest corners. As the first light of dawn filtered through the tent fabric, Michael awoke to an unusual silence. The normal morning chorus of birds was noticeably absent, creating an eerie stillness that immediately set him on edge. Crawling out of his sleeping bag, he unzipped the tent and peered outside, expecting to see some logical explanation for the silence. The campsite appeared undisturbed at first glance, until Michael noticed something peculiar near his vehicle. The dirt around his car showed strange impressions, not quite human footprints, but certainly not belonging to any animal he recognized. They circled his camp completely, as if something had been walking around his tent while he slept. Michael's heart began to race as he examined the tracks more closely, noticing they appeared to start as deer hooves before gradually transforming into something approximating human feet, yet elongated and with only 4 toes. Michael tried to rationalize what he was seeing, attributing the strange tracks to perhaps a deformed animal or a prank by other campers. Despite his attempts to dismiss his growing unease, he found himself constantly looking over his shoulder as he prepared breakfast. While boiling water for coffee, he heard a sound from the edge of the clearing that made his blood run cold. It wasn't quite a whistle, not exactly a call, but something in between that sounded almost like his name being carried on the wind. Michael froze scanning the tree line carefully, and for a brief moment, he thought he saw something watching him from between the pines. Whatever it was stood upright like a human, but was too tall and thin, its proportions all wrong. When he blinked, the figure was gone, leaving Michael questioning if his imagination was getting the better of him. Determined not to let his nerves ruin the trip, Michael decided to focus on his photography and headed to a nearby ridge he had planned to shoot. As he hiked through the increasingly dense forest, he couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. Occasionally, he would hear branches crack in the distance, always just far enough away that he couldn't identify the source. Around midday, Michael reached the ridge and set up his equipment, the spectacular view temporarily distracting him from his unease. As he adjusted his camera settings, a movement in his peripheral vision caught his attention. About 50 yards away, partially obscured by a boulder, stood what appeared to be a deer. Michael slowly turned his camera toward it, thinking it would make a perfect addition to his landscape shots. But as the animal moved into clearer view, he felt a chill run down his spine. The creature looked like a deer at first glance, but its movements were jerky and unnatural, as if someone wearing a deer costume was trying to mimic the animal's behaviors. Its head tilted at an impossible angle as it stared directly at Michael, displaying no fear or natural caution. Most disturbing of all, its eyes reflected not the normal eye shine of wildlife, but what appeared to be human-like awareness. Michael's finger froze over the shutter button as the creature rose up on its hind legs in a fluid motion that no deer could possibly manage. For several heart-stopping seconds, man and beast locked eyes across the distance before the creature dropped back to all fours and bounded into the forest with uncanny speed. Michael remained rooted to the spot, his mind racing to process what he had just witnessed. When Michael finally returned to his campsite that evening, his hands were shaking so badly he could barely operate his camera to review the photos. To his dismay, the images of the deer-like creature were blurred beyond recognition, showing only a dark smudge against the landscape. What was captured clearly, however, was a strange figure standing among the trees in the background of several shots, photos taken before he had even noticed the deer. The figure was humanoid, but impossibly tall and thin, its limbs distorted and elongated. Though the images were distant, Michael could swear the figure's face was partially obscured by what looked like animal hide. His grandfather's stories about the Navajo Skinwalkers, evil witches who could transform between human and animal form, suddenly felt uncomfortably relevant. That night, sleep eluded Michael as he lay awake, listening to the sounds outside his tent. The normal wilderness noises had returned, but occasionally they would all stop at once, creating pockets of silence that seemed to press against his ears. Around 2 a.m., he heard what sounded like footsteps circling his tent, too heavy to be a small animal, but moving with a strange, uneven gait. Then came the voices, whispers that sounded like his name being called from different directions, sometimes mimicking voices of people he knew. Most disturbing was hearing what sounded exactly like his mother calling for help, despite her being hundreds of miles away. Michael knew the legends well enough. Skinwalkers were said to mimic the voices of loved ones to lure victims out of safety. He clutched his flashlight tightly, determined not to leave his tent regardless of what he heard. As dawn approached and the eastern sky began to lighten, Michael made the decision to pack up and leave immediately, no longer caring about completing his planned trip. As he hurriedly dismantled his tent, he noticed something that hadn't been there the night before. Just beyond the perimeter of his campsite was a small arrangement of bones, forming a crude symbol on the ground. The bones appeared fresh, with bits of tissue still attached, and Michael recognized them as rabbit bones, similar to the rabbit he had seen hopping through his camp the previous morning. Fighting rising panic, he threw his gear haphazardly into his vehicle, constantly scanning the tree line where he felt hidden eyes watching his every move. Just as he was about to drive away, his gaze was drawn to a tall pine at the edge of the clearing. There, hanging from one of the lower branches, was the skin of a deer, stretched out and displayed like a grotesque warning. Michael's tires kicked up dust as he sped down the dirt road leading back to the highway, his heart pounding in his chest. In his rearview mirror, he caught one final glimpse of something moving at the edge of the forest, a tall, emaciated figure that seemed to be wearing the head of a deer as a mask, its unnaturally long arms hanging by its sides. As the miles increased between Michael and the campsite, he tried to convince himself that what he had experienced could be explained rationally. Perhaps it was an elaborate prank, or maybe the isolation had played tricks on his mind. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that he had encountered something ancient and malevolent, something that had been toying with him rather than attacking outright. What troubled him most was the thought that had he stayed another night, whatever had been circling his camp might have done more than just watch and whisper and whisper.